But let's start, I guess, because of that. Let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Before I go forward, anywhere forward, Gardner Minshew, this backup quarterback who's playing, he's looking pretty good, by the way, as you'll see in my Fantasy Football Fallout episode, which is available on Underdog TV. On YouTube, by the way. We don't actually have a TV station. It's YouTube, Underdog TV. Gardner Minshew, I noticed his jersey says Minshew Minshew the second. And isn't it weird, Sam, if you name somebody like, obviously, so his dad or his grandfather or whatever was named Gardner Minshew, right?
Actually, no.
No.
That's what makes the story even weirder.
Okay, so you tell me then, because...
his dad just named him the second, even though there is no first.
I said last week on one of my Fantasy Football Fallouts, he looks like if Roger Federer and Burt Reynolds from the 70s had a love child. That's Gardner Minshew is who they'd spit out. So Gardner Minshew the second. What I think is weird is anybody who names their kid the second instead of just calling him Junior, aren't you basically just saying, I want you to name your kid after me too? Aren't you basically saying, I want there to be a third? Because you don't really see a lot of twos out there. You see a lot of juniors. But if you put the if you put the two out there, you're basically saying, I expect you to name your son after me. That's it, right? There's no other way.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a dying breed of naming your kids after you. I don't know too many people that do that anymore. I think a lot of people still will combine a family name somewhere in the middle name or whatever. I know I've done that. I know you've done that.
Right.
But just going with the complete, I want you to have my name, just I don't think exists as much, in our generation and generations after us.
Like Prince Edward the 14th,
Right. Yeah, we don't, we try to get a little bit more creative and let people have their own individuality.
I know. Now you just see random grocery store items. It'd be hummus Ryan, son of Sean. You're getting weirder and weirder stuff. There's I was at a preschool for my daughter, and there's a Gunner in there, which I actually kind of like that name, Gunner. There's there's a lot of more weird and obscure stuff. You're just random adjectives and verbs. You're getting table Ryan, son of daughter of Sean Ryan, the table. Drill bit Taylor. There you go. So let's talk about Jalen Ramsey a little bit. So this is the most bizarre thing I saw because, is people who I guess follow me a little bit. I'm doing these fantasy football fallouts on YouTube. I know you've seen them, Sam. If you haven't checked them out, these are 5 to 10 minute videos just about me watching the game. So the deal is I watch every game every week, every single play of the game too. So I have NFL Game Pass. I watch the condensed versions, and you have to do that as a fantasy football, I guess, and better, right? Because I bet a lot too. You have to watch the games to see how are the offensive lines playing, who are the young guys. There's a young guy in Detroit who I like quite a bit that I don't think anybody would have known about if I hadn't, or I certainly wouldn't have known about him if I hadn't been watching the tape. And I saw this guy Ty Johnson in Detroit. I was just like, holy crap, this guy looks good. And wouldn't you know it, I think Detroit waived C.J. Anderson right after this game, right after he played really well. And you understand why when you go back and you watch the games. So I have the TV, Sam, you've seen them. I have about 4 games going live that I watch at all times a day. So on a typical Sunday, I'll have watched about 7 to 8 games live, not including Thursday night and Sunday night and Monday night football. So I actually watch probably about 11 games a week live. And then I'll go back and whichever ones I don't watch, I'll clean up and I'll watch on Game Pass. But then the other thing too is that I cycle through the game, so I don't watch the same teams every week because usually I like to cycle through. So I usually pick different teams that I haven't watched live in a while too. But anyway, I was watching this Jacksonville stuff last week, and I saw that early in the game when they were playing the Texans, I saw Jalen Ramsey just go ape shit when they didn't call the pass interference penalty, or I'm sorry, he wanted them to challenge a first down reception to DeAndre Hopkins because he felt very passionately, apparently, that Hopkins didn't catch the pass. Then he and Marone got into it on the sidelines. I don't I'm not a big Doug Marone fan anyway. And I just I commented on the Fantasy Football Fallout, he was having a tantrum. Well, after I posted that video, you see that he's asked for a trade that all stems from this. And I just thought this is really weird, but let me get your thoughts on it.
Man, he's a weird dude, and
Yeah.
Doug Marrone is a blowhard.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
Doug
totally.
Doug Marrone's the guy that's like the head of the HOA president. You know, he's
Oh
the
gosh,
president of the
yeah.
HOA, and he
Telling
kind
you
of
to
like
cut your
carries that
grass more
around. Yeah,
frequently
yeah,
and
yeah. So I
yeah.
felt like it was only a matter of time before these two got into it because it's just two totally different
Generations
culture
and
aspects,
yeah.
and generations, and you're just, Doug Marrone still thinks he's still got like that drill sergeant kind of mind, and you and I have talked about this
With Gruden
a
in
million
Oakland.
times.
Yeah.
It's just that stuff's going away, man. You got to be able to relate somewhat to these players and know that the kind of money these guys make and the kind of money they can make and where they can go and how they can sometimes dictate their own, futures. You got to at least try to have a good, front from the head coach. But yeah, I mean, it didn't really surprise me. It's kind of surprising this early in the year after he was, all gung ho, and now he's just like, I want to be traded because I got into one argument.
Yeah.
But I just think that's a millennial thing. That's a cultural thing of what's going on, just in pro sports all throughout, all of them right now. If these guys don't like something for, if they have a bad 20 minutes out of their day, they want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. That's what it was.
I know, and he came through
a bad 20 minutes, and it's like, all right, now I don't want to be a part of this franchise anymore.
And there, I mean, a few good quips there. So you mentioned, I think Chris and Anshu on the Underdog this week, they had a nice segment about how the NFL is turning into the NBA with some of this stuff. I mean, you see and they were talking about Jalen Ramsey, and you saw it with Antonio Brown getting himself out of Oakland and all that stuff, and they are starting to dictate their terms a little bit. Now, the NFL is a little harder to do that because there are salary cap ramifications. It's not as easy as, hey, I'm just going to trade this salary and you're going to take the salary, because there's accelerated money. So it's not always going to be that way, at least not until we get a new collective bargaining agreement, which, there's likely to be a lockout or a strike next year, which would break my heart. But I'm sure they'll figure out how to get everything going. But yeah, so there's that, and then gosh, what was the last thing you said? I had the 20 minutes out of your day. We were talking. So Jalen Ramsey came through FSU, and you and me growing up in Central Florida, we know people that have gone through that FSU program. Right. And that's when like the Jameis Winston allegations that came out, and there's always like, it's a very polarizing topic. It's a very serious allegation. The rape stuff. And what people say nationally is like, well, it's he said, she said. You got to give fair stuff. It didn't go to trial. It didn't go to court. But what you and I know, Sam, being a little bit more local to the situation, is if you're a starting quarterback on a football team in a small town in a place like Tallahassee or Gainesville. And I'm using those two specifically, not like in Orlando or UCF, not in Miami, but like small towns that college towns. And you could say the same, I guess, with like a Tuscaloosa or any other like Penn State. It took forever for
Madison, Wisconsin.
Right. Like what did we see with Joe Pa in Penn State when all that stuff went down with Sandusky? So like when you get these things, like you see police people being discouraged. You see campus policemen discouraging, people from coming out against anything because they don't want any negative press about their favorite team coming out. And it's a very real thing. Isolated incident aside, did he do it? Did he not do it? I'm not commenting on that. What I'm commenting on is basically these people in small college towns, like these star players, are basically their butts are kissed for years. So you have a guy whose butt was kissed in high school, whose butt was kissed in college, and these kind of like the younger mentality is like, hey, I want my butt kissed in the NFL too. And so when you pair those up with like a guy that doesn't really play that game, Tom Coughlin in the front office, and I'm sure Tom Coughlin likes Doug Marrone. I just think he's a fossil for this league, and I think that Jacksonville could be doing better, although I will say they did make the AFC championship game like 2 years ago, so with Blake Bortles at quarterback. So
very true.
But that's not because of Marrone, man. It's because of the defense. That defense is still sick.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was going to say before is, New England being the odds-on favorite, there's talk about, or I guess rumors. It's really just media speculation. I mean, there's nothing, I don't think, inside the building, but Kansas City being a team that might be interested in trading, a lion's share, of draft picks to get Jalen Ramsey to basically counteract the Antonio Brown acquisition. and New England. And I got to say, like, to me, New England is probably the spoiler alert for my power rankings. New England's probably a little ahead of Kansas City at this point. But if they get Jalen Ramsey, then you got to say, that's a toss up for me. That's like the home team wins that AFC championship game in all likelihood. So it'll be an interesting to see how that shakes out. I think Bovada right now has Jacksonville at plus 6,600. They also have, let me look, Kansas City at plus 700, New England at plus 300 right now. So if Jalen Ramsey, you got to figure Bovada would move Jacksonville down and Kansas City like probably up to like 300-400, something like that, if that trade were to go through. But that would be really interesting. As a football fan, as a football connoisseur, as a football bettor, I would love to see that happen, just because I want to see those two Titans lock up in that AFC championship game. Assuming we get there, there's a long season, injuries could happen, other teams could flourish, but that's the way it's looking right now, right, man?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, can't really.